I got a DM from a viewer of the channel on Instagram asking me to do a video on basic driving techniques, so here we are doing exactly that. Now, I am by no means a pro-level driver, so everything I say in this video can be taken with some scrutiny. All I'm going to do is give you the knowledge I've personally acquired over the last 4 odd years of racing I've done. If you want a more detailed and in-depth video about driving techniques, be sure to let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. In this video, we'll be talking about basic driving techniques that racers should try and learn sooner rather than later. It's also important to note that I'll mainly be talking about e-buggy and e-truggy, as those are the classes I have the most recent experience with and can explain the best, though I will mention 10 scale and Nitro A scale where applicable. Before we begin, I'd like to thank this channel sponsors A-Main Hobbies, Peach State Hobbies, and Cow RC. Anything you guys purchase using the codes or links in the description below will directly support me as well. Let's begin with ground control. Now, when I say ground control, I mean, well, anytime your car is on the ground. This includes acceleration, braking, and cornering, all tying into traction. When accelerating off the line or out of a corner, it's important to note a few things. For one, there's the level of throttle input you actually put in. RC cars have what's called digital proportional steering and throttle. What this means in layman's terms is that you can vary the amount of throttle or steering going into the car. In the case of throttles, it matters because treating the throttle like an on-off switch isn't going to get you anywhere other than Spin City even if you have higher traction. These buggies, if we were to scale them up to full size, would have well above 3,000 horsepower, so knowing when to use that power is very key. When coming out of a corner or off the line from a standstill, you'll want to apply the throttle in a smooth way so the tires under the car are given more time to gain traction. There are 2 ways to do this. The first way I like to call is the nitro finger. Basically, you apply the throttle to full speed to neutral over and over and over again in rapid succession until the buggy gains traction. This is done on nitro cars to keep the RPM up and the engine in the power band so you can basically power out of corners, but can also be used on e-buggies and e-truggies. The other way is the 10 scale method. This way is more common on 10 scale buggies where you have less time to correct slides if they occur, and on e-buggies with people who haven't run nitro very often, like me. This technique basically means applying the throttle to full but much more slowly than the other method and allowing the tires to gain traction without spinning as much. Each way is acceptable and both can be very fast, so if you have a habit of doing one over the other, it's not a big deal. The next ground control part I'd like to talk about is braking. Unlike acceleration, the braking on your car is much more difficult to treat with nuance. The reason why is because the throw on your controller is much more likely to be smaller than the throw for acceleration. Because of this, one thing that a lot of people will do in either their ESC or their controller is reduce the brakes enough to where the wheels won't lock up under braking force. Generally speaking, the higher traction you have, the stronger you can set your brakes. But what about braking itself? Well, the main type of braking on the ground I want to talk about in depth is trail braking. Trail braking works something like this. When braking for a corner, say this half circle here, you apply the brake to slow down for the corner, then as the weight transfers to the front and you start turning towards the apex, you gradually release the brake. Once you reach the apex of the corner, then you can release the brakes completely and get on the throttle in the way we talked about before. The other conventional way of braking is basically where you want to do all of said braking before you reach the corner to begin with. Each way you brake and which one you're comfortable doing will pretty much depend on your driving style and which type of corner you're approaching. It's also important to note that the braking zone you want to hit will be a lot further out than you think. In full-size motorsport, people have a habit of braking too early in fear of death. Because of that fear being reduced to buying parts, people tend to overshoot and completely miss their braking zone before a corner. Moral of the story, you'll usually want to brake a little early compared to what you think will be fast. Speaking of cornering, the same rule of proportional input applies here as well. You usually don't want to turn the wheel too fast as you'll just produce a lot of understeer or even traction roll in some cases if you have enough traction. You want to turn the wheel going into the corner as smoothly as possible, giving the front of your car time to gain traction and actually allowing your wheels to steer the car. There are some things both in your controller and in your ESC settings that can artificially smooth out your inputs, like Expo, and in the case of this Noble NV4, transit speed on the servo and throttle. Transit speed basically slows down how quickly the given input, be it throttle or steering, to reach 100%. It's usually very good for beginners or other less dexterous drivers who want to smooth out their inputs without having to worry about hand cramps. I may make a video about controller and ESC settings, but that's a project for another day. When it comes to cornering though, you also need to take into account weight transfer. Weight transfer can be explained in a very complicated way, but I'll try to break it down more simply. When you accelerate, the force of said acceleration will cause the rear wheels to gain more traction because the weight of the car is being thrown back. When you brake, the opposite happens, as the weight is being transferred to the front wheels from the braking force. This also applies, of course, to corners as well. When you turn right, all of that weight is being transferred to the two left wheels while the weight on the right wheels is reduced, thus creating more grip on the left side compared to the right. Knowing when each wheel on the car has traction and when they don't can really help in making you a better and more knowledgeable driver. Now, we are talking about off-road RC racing, and in off-road RC racing there are jumps of many varieties. How you approach them can also vary, but they all have roughly the same idea behind them. You can break the jump into 3 different parts: the approach, aerial control, and landing. The approach to a jump is probably the most important part and is very easy to get wrong. One thing that I see a lot of novice and some sportsman level drivers do is sort of drive up slowly to a jump, and then on the jump face, they apply a lot of throttle. This can work, and in some scenarios you have no choice but to do so. Say the jump is right after a 180 hairpin. But generally speaking though, the way you want to approach the jump is actually kind of the opposite. You actually want to accelerate up to the jump face, and then when you reach it, you want to let off a little bit or even brake depending on your skill level to get the nose to come down a little bit to make aerial control a little bit easier. Speaking of which, aerial control is probably the most advanced part of this video and something you usually have to learn with time. However, I will do my best to teach the fundamentals in a short form YouTube video. For one, there's the forward and backwards, otherwise known as pitch. Pitch is usually the easiest to control as the way you control it is with your throttle alone. When you brake in the air, all of that rotational mass from the wheels and tires causes the car to pitch or lean forward. You can use this to your advantage in some ways, and in some cases it's necessary to correct a bad launch of a jump. However, if your nose comes down too much and you're about to nosedive into the dirt, giving the car a lot of throttle will cause the nose down movement to slow down or even raise the nose depending on how much throttle you put into it. Like before, this is mainly a learn with time and experience thing. Luckily though, it isn't something that takes too long to learn. However, your mileage may vary. Roll and yaw are very different beasts, and to be honest, I still haven't fully mastered this one either. I'm able to pull off this kind of control most of the time, though I'm not really doing it consciously. I'll get to that point in a bit. Once you get the launch and pitch control down, that's when you can start to worry about those tenths you'll gain from getting control over the roll and yaw of your buggy in the air, otherwise known as whipping. Whipping is another thing that carries over from motocross to off-road RC racing. It is a technique whose basic idea is to set yourself up for a corner after landing in a jump, as it will change the roll and yaw of your car in the air. The way you do this is by turning the wheel the opposite direction of where you want the car to point once it lands. If you want the car to land facing to the right, turn the front wheels to the left in the air. If you want it to land facing left, you turn the wheel right in the air. Again, this is something you only learn through time, repetition, and a few broken parts. Lastly, you have the landing. Now, there are a couple safer ways to land, like landing off the throttle to save your diff gears and keep the car neutral, but I know you guys aren't here to learn all the safe driving tech, so why don't we talk about how to gain speed on a landing while also keeping the car stable. You see, the reason why on RC you want to land nose down goes beyond wanting a smooth landing. You see, when you're able to get on the throttle a fraction of a second before you land, you can use that rotational mass to get the car to sort of dig itself into the track wheels first. This is why when you see some higher level drivers' cars, they seem to be more stable on landings while also gaining speed. This isn't something you can always do. For example, you might need to turn or brake as soon as you land after a 180, but it's still a way to gain a few tenths if you're able to handle that speed, because trust me, it will generate a lot of it. Learning and cementing the basics of RC driving in a racing context is very important, as if you try to do more advanced things before doing so, you'll sort of begin to overreach yourself in terms of skill and probably break something. This is easier said than done though, as everything happens very fast in RC compared to other forms of motorsport. You have time to think about hitting the brake zones and apexes in full-size cars. You really don't in RC racing. And because you have no force feedback with the car through your controller, you kind of have to sight read what your car is doing and adjust accordingly. The basics at the end of the day though will get you pretty much 90% of the way to being a good driver. The rest will come with time. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and sub to the channel if you'd like to see more. I'd also like to tell you that shirts, as of the time of this video being released, are being made right now. A lot of them have already been pre-ordered, so if you want one, be sure to let me know in my DM inbox or on Patreon. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my active patrons and channel members Michael Williams, Dave Armstrong, Rob Bedingfield, Caden Merks, Ian Petrie, Jeffrey Kunz, Shane T. Ruth, Gable Barber, Freeman Racing Team, Jeffrey Kunz again, Relesque86, Krellymore RC, Brian G, and especially Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.